Darren!
What the fuck?
Darren, get off!
What the hell?
Get off, Darren!
What the hell?
Darren!
What the fuck?
Lucy, you're alright. Lucy, come here. Lucy.
We are talking Paranormal Farm 3, Halloween. This one is written, directed, and stars Carl Medland as a character called Carl. Now, for transparency, I haven't seen the original two Paranormal Farm movies, but I have done a little bit of reading up prior to watching this one to get myself familiar with this micro-budgeted found footage franchise. So the plot of this movie is we have Carl and Taz, who are the kind of the stars of this series, I suppose, and they are paranormal investigators who have made a movie which has then been released on a streaming service, and they are going back to this farm to film special features for the DVD release. Now, the original movie, the first Paranormal Farm, is actually that film, so it kind of has a somewhat of a meta-narrative. We have seen it done before. If you'll remember the Blair Witch 2, The Book of Shadows, that was actually had a similar thing where the original Blair Witch movie was released and existed in the universe of the sort of second film. So it's kind of similar to that. So it has been done before, but nonetheless it's somewhat of a, you know, unusual kind of setup for a film. And when these guys get to this farm, there is, of course, paranormal stuff going on. But what could it be? Could it be poltergeists? Could it be some type of creature, or is there much more of a terrestrial threat going on? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So let's discuss what works, first of all, with Paranormal Farm 3. So this is a next to no budget film, and when you have a pretty much a zero budget movie, you have to be somewhat creative, and you are obviously limited to what you can do. Now, if you have a good idea, we have seen very low budget films work before. Is this a good idea? Maybe it's got a couple of okay kind of ideas. The first one being this kind of somewhat meta-narrative, I would say, which makes quite a kind of a fun experience, or at least a fun potential storyline. Even though I haven't seen the first two movies, I obviously understood what was kind of going on. So it does a decent enough job of kind of making you aware of the first two movies, even if you haven't kind of seen them. I'm going to say Carl as well is somewhat of a unique kind of central protagonist from what you've seen in many kind of horror movies. So it's kind of a different style of kind of leading man here, which I thought makes a kind of somewhat of a kind of a welcome change. And I actually quite like the fact that he's somewhat selfish in his motivations. Like, he has been hired to essentially be a paranormal investigator to rid this farm of any kind of, you know, paranormal activity, but he's far more concerned with making footage for his DVD release. And again, it gives this somewhat of a realistic character trait that makes him a bit more of a three-dimensional character rather than just very much a kind of, you know, a typical kind of thinly sketched out character that you will see in a lot of kind of horror movies here. Now, I think they do the best that they can with next to no money in regards to having some events happening within this movie. And there is quite an amusing climax to the movie that will remind you of both Carrie and Scooby-Doo all at the same time. But God, I have to say, this is a little bit of a struggle, to be honest. The movie's so low budget, but it's so overlong. And I feel this movie would have benefited from having 20 minutes to maybe even up to half an hour trimmed off it, to be honest, because it's so full of filler. And it makes for an overblown, bloated experience. Now, when you've got nothing really to watch on screen, it becomes a little bit tiresome. Add to this, I've got to say, the acting here is somewhat unbelievable. Now, I get that Carl Medland is playing an exaggerated version of himself, and all the characters are kind of named after their real-life counterparts. And I'm assuming that's because they're not professional actors, with the exception of one, who Jessica, who is, but looking at her IMDb, is actually a professional actress. But everyone else is more or less just kind of playing an exaggerated version of themselves. But you really do get the sense that they're struggling with any type of dramatic tension here. There doesn't seem to be a hell of a lot of script in this, I have to say. Some of the kind of the reactions and the dialogue here makes it somewhat jarring. So there's obviously certain lines which have been written down, and they seem very scripted, but there's certain kind of reactions to things that just seem people are a bit perplexed about what they should be doing. So it makes for a somewhat uneven experience, to be honest. But there's just so much time wasted here doing kind of menial jobs, and the movie to me doesn't. The biggest thing I didn't like about this film, I would say, is that the most paranormal thing that happens in the movie is right at the beginning when they kind of go into this farmhouse, and yet seconds after this event, which is essentially life-changing, where we have mannequins attacking people, they just sit down and have a cup of tea, and then they just carry on with their kind of day, and no one says anything more about it. And that's the biggest thing to happen in the movie. And of course, you don't see anything. It's just someone's holding a mannequin and going, "Oh, it's trying to strangle me," or whatever. But and this happens a few times where things happen, and they have a conversation about it, and then just get on with their day basically, and kind of like it's not kind of mentioned again. And I just did that after that kind of initial sequence with these mannequins. It doesn't really make a lot of sense considering the rest of the plot here. It just seems a little bit uneven to me. I have to say, it feels like things were kind of done on the fly, and although there might be a basic outline, they've had Carl Medland's had the idea, "Oh, let's do this," and kind of work it in without it really making a lot of sense here. It's just a bit of a amateur effort and not particularly well thought out. I kind of appreciate the meta-narrative here a little bit. And I got to give maybe some props for that, which I think is the smartest thing this movie does. But yeah, it's a bit of a struggle. There's nothing really happens. There's a lot of downtime in this movie, and when things do happen, it's always kind of off screen and things like this. And we never really kind of get to see anything. And again, that's purely down to budgetary reasons, I suspect. But I can't really recommend this one. There's not much here at all, to be honest. I'll give it a 3 out of 10 for, if you like low budget found footage movies, you may want to check it out. But to me, it was a highly uneven movie, way too long, and didn't have enough kind of going on to it. And I've got to say, to be honest, the climax was a little silly. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.